Hello team, welcome back and welcome to the new section of Docker Swarm. In this particular section, we will discuss about the Docker Swarm basic features and application, right? So first we will start with the Docker Swarm networks. So today we will discuss about the networks, what networks are basically allowed in the Docker Swarm and how they works. So let's start with. So when we are talking about the Docker Swarm networks, so Docker Swarm works with the completely new network which is called overlay network, right? So overlay is a driver which is used to set up the networking for the Docker swarms, right? The overlay network driver creates the distributed network among multiple Docker hosts. It means when we are setting up a Docker cluster, then we are basically setting up the multiple Docker host in a Docker swarm. So in that case, overlay network will create a network system which will distribute the network on all the hosts which are connected with the Docker swarm. The overlay network is only used for the container communication, right? The containers which are running on a cluster 1, if they want to communicate with the containers which is running on the cluster 2, then they will use the overlay network, right? The containers which are running on cluster 3, if they want to communicate with the containers which are running on the master node, right, then they will communicate with the help of the overlay network. But there's a limitation with the overlay network as well, that overlay network will work on a single swarm, right? If you have a multiple swarms, then you need to define the multiple overlay networks. So we have seen that we have initialized the Docker swarm, we have added the nodes in the Docker swarm. So when we are initializing the Docker swarm or a Docker host is joining the existing swarm, then two new networks are created on that particular Docker host, right? The first network is the ingress. Ingress is a by default created overlay network with the Docker swarm. When you are basically initializing the Docker swarm, a default overlay network ingress is created on that particular Docker host, which handles the control and data traffic related to the swarm services. So all the services which is running on the single Docker swarm will communicate with the help of the ingress overlay network. Ingress overlay network will work only if you are not attaching the service with the user defined overlay network, right? If you are not defining any user defined overlay network, then definitely the ingress will be the overlay network which will attach to that particular service and which will be responsible for the complete data flow control on the Docker swarms. As we have discussed, if we are not defining any user defined overlay network, then ingress is the default network which will connect with the Docker swarm service. The second network is called the bridge network. So bridge network is basically called Docker underscore GW bridge. When you are define when you are initializing the swarm, this is the second network which is created by default on your master node or on your leader node, right? Which connects the individual Docker nodes to the swarm node, right? So ingress is basically responsible for the communication of the containers between the Docker swarm, right? And the bridge network is basically responsible for the communication of the node to node, right? How the worker node will communicate with the master node, how the worker node will communicate with the manager node, or all communication which is happening between node to node, the bridge network will responsible for that particular traffic, right? And all the communication which is happening inside the service, inside the containers across the swarm, the ingress or the overlay network will responsible for that particular traffic, right? There are some rules when we are defining the overlay network. The first rule is few ports needs to be empty on the Docker host machine, right? Need the following ports open for the traffic to and from each Docker host participating in the overlay network. TCP port 2377 for the cluster management communication, TCP and UDP port 7946 for the communication among the nodes, and UDP port 4789 for the overlay network traffic. These three ports should be available on the Docker host machine if we are creating the user defined overlay network. The second condition is before creating any overlay network, Docker swarm must be initialized on the node or join an existing swarm, right? So these are the two primary conditions when we are defining the user defined overlay network, right? Now let's see how we can create the user defined overlay network. For this, you need to execute the command docker network create -d, or you can define --driver overlay, then you can define your custom network name. So let's go to the terminal, and first let's see, is Docker Swarm initialized on it or not. So I will execute a command docker info. This is my first node on which we have initialized the Docker Swarm. So definitely the Docker Swarm should be active on this particular node. And over here you can see the Docker Swarm is already activated on this particular node. I will clear out my console, and I need to verify, is default overlay network and default bridge network exist on this particular node or not, right? For this I can execute a command docker network ls. It means I want to list out all the networks which is running or available on this particular host machine. So over here you can see, here we have the ingress C, and the driver is overlay and scope is swarm. So if we are not defining any overlay network, any user defined overlay network, the ingress network created by default. And here is the second network, docker underscore gw bridge, which is created by default, right? Now let's see how we can create the user defined overlay network. For this we need to enter a command docker network create hyphen d, define the driver, and define the network name, my underscore overlay, right? Hit enter. Oh, there's a mistake. I need to define hyphen d, not hyphen f. Hit enter. You can see a network is being created by this particular id. If I will execute docker network ls again, then I can see a new overlay network named my underscore overlay is being created. The scope is swap, right? Now to discuss the use of overlay network, let's create few services on a Docker host machine, right? So suppose first we are creating an database service, then we will create a web service like Drupal, right? And the both of the service will create on the user defined overlay network. Then let's see what is happening inside the Docker Swarm. So let's clear out the console, and suppose first I'm going to create the service, the Postgres database service. So Docker Swarm Docker service create hyphen hyphen name, and I will name it Postgres. Define the network hyphen hyphen network. Network is my overlay. Define the environment variable password. So Postgres underscore password equals to my password. Then define the image name. So Postgres, right? Hit enter. So this will create the Postgres service. So right now you can see it is preparing the service. Once it will done, it will show you the completion message. So it is verifying the task is stable and service created. If I will execute docker service ls, then I can see a Postgres service is being created, right? Now suppose we are creating another service, Drupal service, which is a web service and which will use this particular database as a DB. So I will create another service like create like docker service create hyphen hyphen name, call it my Drupal hyphen hyphen network, which will use the same network, my overlay. Suppose I'm defining the port, the host port is 80 and access port is also 80, right? And Drupal, hit enter. So Drupal is the image name. So right now you can see it is basically preparing the service. Once it will done, it will show you the confirmation message. So we have to wait until the complete process will done. So right here you can see we are not getting that the image is being downloading and the server is being created. No, just we are getting the service status. If I will execute a command docker service ls, then we can see the my Drupal and Postgres service are running, right? If we will ps these services, so suppose I'm executing the docker service ps, and first I want to identify that where my Postgres is running. So my Postgres is running on my node 3, right, which we have created in the last tutorial, right? And in the similar way, suppose I want to identify where my Drupal is running. So my Drupal is running on port on node 1. See, so they both of the services are running on the separate nodes, right? DB is running on node 3 and Drupal is running on node 1, right? Now let's go to the browser, copy the IP of my first node and paste it over here. Hit enter. Then you can see it is opening your Drupal service. So when you will hit the IP, you will land on this particular web page. Why we don't need to append any port with the IP? Because we have started the traffic on port 80, and by default, if we are not providing any port, then it will take the 80 as a default, right? Now to continue, we need to click the save and continue button. And over here, we need to choose the installation profile. So suppose we are going with the standard, and this will land you on this particular web page where we need to set up the database. So as we have already configured and started the service of the Postgres SQL, so I will copy this. In the database name, you can enter anything. I'm going to enter Postgres, right? By default, if you are not providing the Postgres username, then the Postgres user is Postgres itself, right? Then over here, you need to define the password which you have supplied inside your service. So we have supplied the password mypass. So I will define the mypass over here. Click on the advanced options, and here instead of the local host, remove this local host and provide your service name, your database service name. So copy your database service name and provide it over here, right? Click save and continue button. So this will land you on the install site page, right? So right now it is installing the Drupal on your containers. So we have to wait until the complete installation will done. It will take very less time, mostly 20 to 25 seconds. So let's wait. Now you can see it is asking for the site information. So we will provide some information, right? And once you will fill this particular form, click on save and continue. So right now this will land you on the welcome page, right? So let's wait. And we are on the welcome page, right? My site is www.testme.com, right? Here I am getting the complete configuration. With the help of this configuration, I can manage my site on the Drupal, right? So over here we was accessing one node, right? Let's go to the DigitalOcean and copy any IP. Suppose I'm going to copy the IP of server 3, right? And paste it over here. So you can see this will land you on the same page. Now let's copy another IP. I'm copying the IP of server 2, right? I will paste it here and remove the first one. Then this will open the same page again, right? If I will copy the another IP, suppose I'm going to copy the IP of my node 1, which was the master node, and paste it here, then this will again open the same site, right? So you can see either the Drupal container is running on single node, but I am able to access that service from all the nodes which are running inside the Docker Swarm cluster, right? So what is this? We will discuss these things in the coming tutorial. Today we have seen how we can create the service on the overlay network in Docker Swarm. So thank you, Tim. Thanks for your time.